Hi, thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's great to be in Oregon on this beautiful sunny day. Can everybody hear me okay? Can everybody understand my accent? Okay. Look, Oregon is the state of the United States that looks most like New Zealand. So it's really good to be here. Look, I want to start off by saying a lot of people ask me why I should care about the internal politics of your country. I say there's two reasons for that. The first is simple gratitude. My country would not be free. My country would have been subjugated by Japan in World War II had it not been for the huge sacrifice of your uncles and grandfathers and great-grandfathers in the battles of Guadalcanal and the Coral Sea and Midway during World War II. So thank you very much, America, for that. The second reason is related, but it's a little more selfish. Ronald Reagan had it right. This is the last best hope for mankind. If freedom fails in the United States, it will fail in every country of the globe. If freedom fails here, the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians and the Cubans and the Venezuelans and all their crazed allies will carve up this planet amongst themselves. That is why I'm here. A lot of people email me and say, if Obama gets back in again, God forbid, can I come down and live in New Zealand? And I say, look, it's a great country, you'll love it, but this is where the fight is. This is the front line for liberty now. 1,000 miles to the north of my country lies Fiji. Beautiful islands, lovely place, but they now have a Marxist government. The Chinese are training the Fijian army and building big hydroelectric dams on the island. Fiji is now a Chinese client state, and that's happening right throughout the South Pacific. Recently, the Australian Defence Minister was in China, and a top official of the Chinese Defence Ministry said to him, "Now is the time for Australia to choose. Do you stay under the protection of America or do you come under our protection?" And that would not have happened under Reagan or Bush, but it happens under your president today, because every ally of America around the world is watching your president and thinking, they are freaking out, thinking, can we rely on America anymore? Can we rely on America to guard our freedom, to guard our liberty? And that is the international consequence of the Obama presidency. Your allies all over the world, from Israel to Taiwan to New Zealand to Australia to your European allies, are all gravely concerned. And they're thinking, what are we going to do? Do we have to build our own nuclear weapons? Do we have to make our peace with China or Russia or Iran or whoever is the biggest bully in our region? So why have we got to this? Why is Obama doing everything he can to throw his support behind, basically give his support to the dark powers of this world? Why do the Russians love him? I think Obama has no choice really, because he's always thought the way he does. His very first mentor was a man called Frank Marshall Davis. Chicago, you know, Frank Marshall Davis is a black guy, a poet, a writer, a Communist Party member in Chicago in the 1940s. Very influential in the Chicago left. But in 1948, he left it all behind to travel out to Hawaii, a little backwater in the Pacific as it was then. But that was because, why would he do that? Because Stalin had told the American Communist Party to move as many comrades as they could onto the islands, because that's where Pearl Harbor was. And they wanted as many spies and agitators as they could on the island to monitor your military activities on behalf of the Soviet Union. Out in Hawaii, Frank Marshall Davis was a good communist. He infiltrated the Democrat Party. But he also had a bit of a hobby. And the FBI, who was watching him for 19 years, had reports that he was photographing obscure beaches in Hawaii with telephoto lenses. And I think they thought this might have been espionage, because they've put Frank Marshall Davis on the security index. And that means that if war had ever broken out with the Soviet Union, Frank Marshall Davis would have been arrested that very day. And that was an honour only reserved for the most dangerous communists. So Frank Marshall Davis, about 1970, was introduced to your young future president. Obama was 10 or 11 at the time. And he had his ear for 9 or 10 years. Frank Marshall Davis, the name Frank is mentioned in Barack Obama's book, Dreams from My Father, 22 times, described as a very influential mentor. But he wouldn't mention his entire name because Frank Marshall Davis was known as a communist. And I guess your president really didn't want that known. This was the man who wrote poems praising Stalin, poems praising the Red Army, poems viciously castigating racist KKK America. And this was the man who had the ear of your president for 9 or 10 years. So Obama leaves Frank Marshall Davis. He goes to Occidental College, mixes with the Marxists there, goes to Columbia University, where he attended at least one or maybe two of the annual Socialist Scholars Conferences then being held there. These were gatherings of 2,000 to 3,000 Marxist radicals, black activists, gay radicals, radical feminists, Marxist labour unionists, all gathered in a hall plotting how to bring your country to its knees. And Mr. Obama was right in the midst of it. Mr. Obama then goes out to Chicago. Then he goes to Harvard to get a law degree because he had his eyes set on politics. He comes back to Chicago and he was picked up and mentored and guided in his early political career by an Illinois state senator named Alice Palmer. Alice Palmer decided to run for Congress. She employed Obama as her chief of staff, and she said to Obama, "You get me elected to Congress and you can have my state Senate seat." So they worked together for several years. In the end, Alice Palmer didn't get the congressional seat and wanted her state Senate seat back, but Obama says, "No, tough luck, Alice." And he got her disqualified off the ballot. So he's playing hardball all the way. But Alice Palmer had a history, and it's a very interesting one. In 1970 and 1980, she was invited by the Marxist-Leninist dictator of Grenada in the Caribbean to the first anniversary of that country's celebrations of that country's communist revolution. In 1983, she was out in Hawaii. She was in Prague in communist Czechoslovakia for a meeting of the Soviet Front World Peace Council. Now remember this, the Soviets' biggest front, and it still exists, the World Peace Council, was financed to the tunes of hundreds of billions of rubles. And its whole objective was to destroy the United States military. They agitated against NATO, against Star Wars, whatever Reagan or any other US president proposed in the way of defence, they campaigned against it because they knew that your military was the only thing standing between them and world domination. That's why they put so much money into this front. Alice Palmer was also the leader of the Black Press Institute, a nationwide network of communist journalists connected to the Palestine Liberation Organization, which job was to sow Soviet disinformation and propaganda amongst your country's black population. In 1985, she took 16 of these people to the Soviet Union, East Germany and Czechoslovakia for meetings with high-level government officials, the editor of Pravda, you name it, they were there. In 1986, Alice Palmer was elected North American Vice President of the International Organization of Journalists, a bona fide Soviet KGB front. And she was a top official. In 1986, she covered that year's annual conference of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. So Alice Palmer, the woman who gave your president his first job in politics, was effectively a high-level Soviet agent of influence. There is no other way to describe her. Frank Marshall Davis, communist and possible Soviet spy. Alice Palmer, Democrat, and definite Soviet agent of influence. Two key people in Obama's background. What about today? Who's around Obama today? You know, you're judged by the company you keep. And I've got to say, I'm very, very proud to be judged by the company here today. Very proud. We'll talk about two people. I could talk about dozens of them. I could talk all day. Two key people. The other half of Obama's brain, Valerie Jarrett. Got introduced Obama to his wife, smoothed his way through Chicago politics, and now sits as his closest advisor in the White House. Without doubt, the most powerful woman in America. What is her background? Valerie Jarrett's mother is Barbara Bowman. Runs a child psychology institute out of Chicago, the Erickson Institute. Has had huge influence on early childhood education throughout your country. In 2009, President Obama gave Barbara Bowman an award for her work, and that ceremony was covered in the pages of the Communist Party USA's People's World. On the board of the Erickson Institute Eric Erickson. Anybody here remember the old phrase, identity crisis? If you're an old hippie from the 60s, you probably would. Sorry, ma'am. No, you heard it from your granddad, I'm sure. Okay, but that was Eric Erickson. He was a disciple of Sigmund Freud. He was kicked out of Berkeley University in the 1940s because he refused to sign an anti-communist loyalty oath. He was a lecturer at the California Labor School, the Communist Party USA's main school in California. On the board of the Erickson Institute have served Tom Ayers, the father of famous Weather Underground terrorist Bill Ayers, and Bernadine Dawn, a famous terrorist in her own right, both good friends of Mr. Obama, long-time friends. Barbara Bowman's grandfather, maternal grandfather, was Robert Taylor, first black head of the Chicago Housing Authority. He was an active leader of the American Peace Mobilization in the 40s, Communist Party front, and their job was basically to let the Nazis destroy Britain, because they agitated to keep you guys out of the war, because at that time the Nazis and the Soviets were allies. So they campaigned, they were the biggest peaceniks you could ever imagine. But then the Soviets were betrayed by Hitler. Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, and overnight the American Peace Mobilization became the American People's Mobilization, the most ardently pro-war, patriotic organization in the country, because their Soviet fatherland was threatened. And Valerie Jarrett's grandfather was a key part of that, where he worked alongside a man called Frank Marshall Davis. On the other side of Valerie Jarrett's family, her late father-in-law, Vernon Jarrett, a very prominent black newspaper man out of Chicago, a journalist. The last thing he did when he was dying of cancer in 2004 was to issue a call to the black population of South Chicago to get out and vote for Barack Obama in that year's Senate primaries. You go back to 1946, Vernon Jarrett was serving on the Illinois State Executive of American Youth for Democracy. Wonderful sounding organisation, youth wing of the Communist Party USA. 1948, Vernon Jarrett was serving on the publicity committee of the Packing House Workers' Strike Committee. On that committee with him, this was a communist union, he was writing their press releases, their propaganda. On that committee with him served Frank Marshall Davis. So isn't it interesting that both Valerie Jarrett and Barack Obama can trace their lineage back to the Communist Party of USA, of Chicago of the 1940s, and Mr. Frank Marshall Davis. The other half of Mr. Obama's brain, which doesn't leave very much really, and that's Mr. David Axelrod. Dirty David, kneecapper, character assassin, black propagandist. He wins his elections by destroying his opponent. That's what he does, which is why Mr. Romney has to face gay haircut stories and propaganda about his time at Bain Capital. But where did Mr. Axelrod learn his trade? Where did he learn his profession? When David Axelrod came to Chicago in the 1972 to basically learn political science at the University of Chicago, he was picked up and mentored by two very prominent journalists, activists, Don Rose, David S. Cantor. These guys got him his first job in politics and in journalism, and they worked together on several political campaigns in Chicago. They taught him his trade. Don Rose and David S. Cantor had a little publication in Chicago which is called the Hyde Park Kenwood Voices. It was basically the voice of the South Chicago left, and it promoted communist causes. It carried articles about cutting sugarcane in Cuba for Castro, about visiting North Vietnam during the Vietnamese War, the SDS riots in Chicago in 1968, and it also had a regular column by their local congressman named Abner Mikva. He was very much part of their organisation. Abner Mikva was very vocal in Congress, was a total advocate of destroying your Second Amendment. He hated the fact that you could keep and bear arms. When he left Congress, he became an open supporter of a Marxist group, Democratic Socialists of America, and as a law professor for many years, he mentored your president, Mr. Obama. He also mentored another Chicago law professor for many years. I'm sure you will all know her, and that's Yelena Kagan, who now serves on your Supreme Court. So Don Rose and David Cantor. Don Rose was a communist fronter since the 40s. His police squad file describes him as a dangerous anarchist. He was a long-time executive member of the Chicago Committee to Defend the Bill of Rights, where he worked, which was the Communist Party's main front in Chicago. The other half of the partnership, David Cantor. His father was Harry Cantor. In the 30s, he was the leader of the Massachusetts Communist Party. He was jailed for a year for sedition, and in 1932, he took his whole family, including baby David, to the Soviet Union. He got a personal audience with Stalin, and he worked as a translator of Lenin's works from Russian to English. That is quite an honour. By 1937, they were back in America. In the 1940s, they were both living in Chicago, Harry and David Cantor. Harry Cantor was active in the Communist Party, and in 1948, he was part of a little group who bought a communist newspaper called the Chicago Star off a man who owned it and was moving out to Hawaii. That was Frank Marshall Davis. David Cantor was also active in the Communist Party. Go forward to 1960. David Cantor was running a little publication company out of Chicago, Transworld Publications. They were receiving a regular subsidy from the Soviet Embassy in Washington. He ran it with his partner called Leroy Wolins, Communist Party member, later a founder of Veterans for Peace, another anti-military communist front. These two men were getting paid by the Soviet Embassy in Washington to distribute communist and Russian literature all over your country. They were both required to register by your government as agents of the Soviet Union. Go forward to 1964, and that election was almost important as this one. Lyndon Johnson, the Democrat, versus Barry Goldwater, the Republican. Johnson won. We got the Great Society, the greatest expansion of welfare and federal power since the New Deal. The Great Society that put millions of black and poor white families in this country on welfare and basically destroyed them for generations. Barry Goldwater was a conservative Republican, a constitutionalist. Reagan before there was a Reagan. He would have loved the Tea Party, conservative Republicans, and they would have loved him. He's a great man, and had he won that election, this country would be a much stronger, happier and healthier place today. I can guarantee it. But he didn't win, and one of the main reasons he didn't, because he was vilified viciously in your press as a racist, a fascist and an extremist. Has anybody here heard those terms in recent times? Familiar at all? One of the main sources of the vilification of Barry Goldwater was Trans World Publications out of Chicago, the little communist Soviet-subsidised company run by David Cantor, who went on to mentor Mr. Axelrod. So when you look at Mr. Axelrod, he learned his trade at the hands of a Soviet-paid professional black propagandist and character assassin. That's what you're up against with Mr. Axelrod. So that brings me to what I consider is the true agenda of the left. What do they want for your country? Well, I want to say what it is, and it isn't to make you like France, as some people would tell you. But before I say what it is, I want to build up a little bit of credibility for an Albuquerque high school math teacher named Mark Rudd. Who's he? Mark Rudd was the brains of the terrorist Weather Underground organisation, right up there in the top leadership with Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dawn. In 2006, he came together with Bill Ayers, Bernardine Dawn, Tom Hayden, Angela Davis, David Graeber, one of the founders of the Occupy movement, and a whole bunch of communists and Marxists to set up a new organisation called Movement for a Democratic Society. Don't they love those noble-sounding names? That spawned another offshoot organisation called Progressives for Obama, also run by a whole bunch of communists. Mark Rudd endorsed Progressives for Obama. So I'm trying to say that Mark Rudd is a key man on the left, and he knows people who know Obama. In 2008, November, just after the election, Barack Obama, President-elect Obama, appointed a whole bunch of some conservatives to positions in your defence establishment. And while people on our side of the fence breathed a sigh of relief, the left were spewing. They were livid. How dare Mr. Obama, the man we put in power, put conservatives into the hated military-industrial complex? And Mark Rudd's inbox was filling up with emails from irate comrades all over the country. So I wrote a little article in the Rag blog out of Texas, November 28, 2008, Let's Get Smart About Obama. And on that, he revealed Obama's agenda, in my opinion. What he said was something along the lines of this: Obama is a very strategic thinker. He knew precisely what it would take to get elected, and he didn't blow it. He knew he had to play to the centre to not be run over by the Republicans or the press or to scare centrist voters away. So he has a narrow mandate for change. The economic agenda will stress stimulus from the bottom at times and handouts to the top at others. Has that happened? It has. He said, but never threaten the military budget. That will unite a huge majority of Congress against him. And I agree with this strategy. But 2 or 3 years into this recession, people may begin to discuss cutting the military budget. So where are we now, ladies and gentlemen? 3 years in, right? You're worried about your jobs, keep paying your taxes, keeping your kids in college. America is focused on the economic. And while you're focused there, what is smiling Leon Panetta, a man with a foot-long Marxist record, as your Secretary of Defence, what is he doing in your Department of Defence right now? Why is 20% of US federal spending taking more than 50% of the cuts? Why is Mr. Obama talked about cutting the US nuclear arsenal down to 300 nukes when the Russians have thousands of them and the best civil defence system in the world? Tell me, who has been subsidising the peace movement in this country for decades? Who was Alice Palmer working with? The World Peace Council. Who gains most from destroying your military? Russia, China, Iran, Cuba? Because they know if they can take down your military, there is no opposition to what they want to do. And that is the #1 agenda of the left. That is where this is heading. This is not about a depression. This is not about losing your liberty. This is about losing your national sovereignty and possibly even having your country reduced to a pile of ashes. Mr. Obama was caught a few months ago in Korea talking to Mr. Dmitry Medvedev, the Russian president, off mic. Dmitry, when I get re-elected, I will have more flexibility to deal with you. I understand. I will take your message to Vladimir. We are with you. What is he with them on? What do you think it might be? Where do you think, if you were a Russian or a Chinese leader, what would you be putting your money into? What would gain you more than anything else? Destroying your military. That's the target. Now, Mark Rudd hadn't quite finished. He went on to say, Obama plays basketball. I'm not much of an athlete. I barely know the game. But one thing I do know is you have to be able to look like you're doing one thing, but do another. That is why all these conservative appointments are important. The strategy is to feint right, move left. Any other strategy invites sure defeat. So in my view, Mr. Rudd is admitting that his president scammed his way into the White House by pretending to be a moderate, but his agenda has always been hard left, and he has your military as his number one, numero uno target. He will destroy it if he is given a second term. And you will have no choice but to be incorporated into some sort of United Nations world superpower or face the combined might of Russia, China, Iran, and all their crazed allies against you, with not a friend left in the world. That is what is up we're facing. Now, I don't want to depress you folks with all of that, or bring you down. This is a celebration. And I'm sorry, but I'm here for the truth, because this has big international implications for all of us. But I'm here for a reason. If I thought there was no hope for America, I'd be back in New Zealand right now building bunkers. But in 2008, the left thought they had a slam dunk. They had the House, they had the Senate, and they had the presidency. All their ducks were in a row. And they had their agenda ready to rock and roll. They were going to grind Middle America out of existence once and for all. But in 2009 and 2010, you people, Tea Party, 912ers, Conservative Republicans and Patriots, you got up and you rediscovered your Constitution and American exceptionalism, and you marched and you agitated and you blogged and you worked and you voted and you campaigned and you stopped the left stone cold dead. You took back the House, you stopped card check, you stopped cap and trade, a whole lot of other crazy things. You slowed down and watered down Obamacare. You brought the left to a screaming, screeching halt. And they hate you for it, which was why I love you for it. Look, I talk to Conservatives and Tea Party folk all over this country, and they all say, it's tough going. Is anybody listening? Are we going to win this thing? Should we even bother? And I say, look, I come from outside your country as an observer, and I look at what you have done in 2 or 3 years. Many of you novice, new to politics, in 2 or 3 years, you have saved your country. You gave your country a second chance. You may not realise it, but you did. And that is so impressive to someone like me. It is so incredibly impressive. And I see this, what's happening now in this country, as the second American Revolution. This is 1773. Because they think the Tea Party and all the Conservatives have gone away. But they don't know about what you're doing in the county commissions, and the school boards, and the state houses, and the legislatures, and the primary races. You are starting a change in the culture of this country that's going to echo for decades and hundreds of years. You think about back in 1773, 40% of the country didn't care, 40% supported the British, and a few farmers and labourers and shopkeepers and lawyers, guided by an ideal, took on the greatest empire the world had ever known to that time and bloody well beat them. How miraculous is that? And look what they created. And look what you guys are in the process of creating now. And don't think you're alone, by the way, because I was at Glenn Beck's function in Dallas a few days ago, and one of the biggest things, it was great. One of the biggest things was they got a whole bunch of Tea Party folk from all over the world up on stage, Australia and Israel and Japan and whatever. This is an international movement. You go forward, take back your country, and we'll take back our countries. So I just want to say to you folk, what you're doing is historic. I know it's hard, I know it's hard graft and nobody cares and it's all tough and whatever, but if you think about the next 3 months, you think about working for the next 3 months, is there any time in your life that 3 months of hard work is going to have a bigger payoff for the future than the next 3 months? Any 3 months in your lifetime. And I urge you, get stuck in. And it won't stop there, but we've got to win this one. We have to win it. So, you know, we really do. And you guys are going to win this, and you're going to keep the faith, and you're going to carry on this revolution forward and restore your republic and put your federal government back where it belongs, right down there. Just, if you doubt the historic nature of what you're doing, I just want you to think in a couple of 100 years' time. Just picture this. Be some young kid, his chest will be puffed out with pride, and he'll be standing in front of a civics class in a high school in America, and this will happen countless times. And they will say, I did some research. I did some genealogical research, and I looked back, way back, and I found out that my great-great-great-great-grandma and granddad, they were in the Second American Revolution. They fought and saved our country. Back in the Obama years when they all thought it was over, when they thought the American Republic was dead, they stood up against all odds and they saved the country. And we enjoy the freedom and prosperity we have today because of what they did back then. And can you think of any movement cooler to be part of than that? Anything more noble and worth giving your efforts to? So I just want to say to you folk, I'm so proud to be here today. I'm so proud to be connected to your movement, to take your country back, to restore your republic. I want to say a big thank you for what you are doing to all of you, and God bless America. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. So you're saying there's just a couple of minutes to go, is it? Yeah, like I could talk for hours, but I love being here with you folk, but I'll just take a couple of questions. Yes, sir?
I have one for you.
Yeah.
Do you have a voice in your legislature in New Zealand?
I belong to a political party called the Association for Consumers and Taxpayers, the ACT Party, which has one member of Parliament currently.
There's one individual, an American citizen, I'd like to see you call him a persona non grata, Peter DeFazio.
Yes, I know. Look, it's one American I want to see living permanently in New Zealand. Not because I like him, because I want to relieve you people of him. Commie Pete is welcome in New Zealand any day. He can come to his 2 holiday homes and stay there in house arrest for as long as he likes. Yes, ma'am.
How infiltrated are we in the state
Yeah, Alan West was wrong about that. He far underestimated the numbers. Look, there's two main Marxist organisations in this country, Communist Party USA and Democratic Socialists of America. I would say about 25 of your congressmen are affiliated to the Communist Party USA heavily, and about 40 to 50, maybe more, are affiliated with Democratic Socialists of America. There are several in your Senate with the same things. I'll just tell you, Obamacare, right? The father of socialised healthcare in this country, Quentin Young out of Chicago, 40-year veteran of the Communist Party USA, Democratic Socialists of America member, personal physician to Barack Obama, claims that he indoctrinated Obama into the ideas of socialised healthcare. The father of Romney Care in Massachusetts and the man who designed Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act, is a man called John McDonough, former Massachusetts state senator. But guess what? Also a member of Democratic Socialists of America. These people are in your state legislatures across the country, especially in Massachusetts, Illinois, Michigan and New York, and they are, a whole bunch of them are in your Congress and House. And they can go down to Cuba one day and sit on the Homeland Security Committee the next. They are infiltrating your country. There's a whole bunch of congressmen, and I'll tell you what, Leon Panetta and Barack Obama would fit in this category. If they applied for a job as a janitor at your local military base, they would nowhere near pass an FBI security clearance. Not a chance.
We have microphones out here on both sides if people need to speak.
Will you name some names? Who are our U.S. senators that are affiliated with the Communist Party?
U.S. Senators, Bernie Sanders, Tom Harkin, senators, I'm trying to think, with the Democratic Socialists of America, Debbie Stabenow up in Michigan, Dick Durbin. In the congressional side, you've got, with the Communist Party, you've got Rosa DeLauro, Danny Davis, Jim McDermott, Jan Schakowsky, Jerry Nadler, John Conyers, Barbara Lee, Maxine Waters, Raul Grijalva. I could go on with several of my members of Democratic Socialists of America, like Jerry Nadler from New York, Danny Davis, Jan Schakowsky, Bob Filner from down in San Diego is also affiliated. I've got the list. I have a website, folks, called KeyWiki, KEYWIK. It's on my card, my business card, and my book's over in the corner there. But KeyWiki is like an encyclopedia of the US left. It works like Wikipedia. There's 61,000 pages, and all of your communist-affiliated congressmen, senators, state senators, secretary of states, etc., have pages on that with their Democratic Socialists of America affiliations, Communist Party affiliations, etc. So it isn't complete yet, but you'll find a lot of information there if you choose to look. I could spend days talking about that lot.
We have one over here on the right.
Okay.
Yes, I was wondering if you knew, I heard a lot of rumors about DeFazio being a Democratic Socialist of America. Do you know if that's true or not?
Yeah, I've been trying to prove that for a long time. He was a founder member of the Progressive Caucus, which was founded by Democratic Socialists of America. And in 1996, they endorsed him, but then a couple of weeks later, they withdrew the endorsement, I suspect, so as to not embarrass him. So I've no proof he's a card-carrying member, but he's certainly affiliated and part of their apparatus. That's as much as I would like to say. So, look, I could talk for years. I'll be speaking again this afternoon, but I want to just say this is a republic worth saving. This is the shining city on the hill, and you people are here, are the soldiers in the front line to save it. And I just want to help you guys, but this is the greatest country in the world leader, and you have to save it. You will save it, and thank you for being here today. Thank you.